I often find myself wondering about the hidden fuel we choose to run our lives on. There is a peculiar state of being that many of us inhabit, where we assume we are driven by ambition, purpose, or passion. But if we pause and examine the underlying biology, we might notice a startling reality. We are not actually running on joy. We are running on a perpetual state of readiness. The brain, adapting to constant environmental pressure, utilizes low-level epinephrine, commonly known as adrenaline, as a continuous, humming fuel source. It functions as an invisible engine of anticipation. We remain perpetually braced for the next requirement, the next subtle shift in the room, the next demand on our attention. This does not look like traditional distress. It does not look like panic. It looks like exceptional competence. We have inadvertently convinced our nervous systems that survival depends on perpetual motion, substituting genuine vitality for a manufactured, relentless momentum that keeps us perpetually hovering above the ground. In the context of modern urban life in 2026, this biological readiness becomes nearly invisible because it perfectly mimics success. I observe individuals navigating perfectly choreographed mornings and relentless digital schedules with profound, almost frightening efficiency. The engine hums quietly in the background of sleek coffee shops and crowded transit lines. Emails are answered swiftly. Complex tasks are executed with surgical precision, and the outward projection remains one of absolute, unwavering control. Society observes this continuous output and immediately issues its highest rewards. Promotions are granted, admiration is freely given, and the bank account quietly suggests that we are definitively winning the game. Yet, we are caught in a positive feedback loop for a deeply demanding biological state. The environment continuously applauds the very mechanism that is quietly depleting our internal reserves. We are burning fuel originally meant for brief bursts of physical survival, stretching it thin across years of daily existence, all while looking incredibly put together. This brings us to a quiet shadow side, one that often goes completely unacknowledged until the fatigue becomes physically impossible to ignore. Before we explore this further, I want to invite you to join this ongoing journey of self-discovery, subscribing to this space as we continue to examine the intricate architecture of our daily lives together. The reality of relying on this adrenaline engine involves profound psychological trade-offs. This state brilliantly prioritizes immediate task execution and situational safety, but the cost is a severe erosion of long-term clarity. The completed to-do lists serve as highly effective decoys, distracting us from the mounting internal debt we are carrying. We maintain our rapid momentum, yet a subtle hollowness begins to echo beneath the surface. We keep moving rapidly because the alternative, actually stopping to face the accumulated exhaustion, feels uncomfortably heavy, leaving us disconnected from our own natural biological rhythms. How then do we learn to coexist with this highly efficient, deeply demanding engine without letting it consume us? The intention is not to eradicate our capacity for deep focus or our ability to respond to reality. Rather, it is about fundamentally shifting our relationship with this state of readiness. What if we began to view this low-level adrenaline not as our default identity, but as a specialized gear designed strictly for temporary use? It requires a delicate, daily calibration, learning to distinguish between an actual necessity for high-level execution and the habitual, lingering urge to remain braced. I wonder what happens when we gently inform our nervous system that the immediate environment is secure. We can acknowledge the immense utility of our drive, while slowly introducing moments where the engine is allowed to completely idle, restoring a sense of internal balance and reminding the body that it is safe to power down. Let us look closely at another fascinating biological maneuver, the phenomenon of emotional decoupling. There is a precise mechanical shift at play within our minds when the demands of reality outpace our capacity to comfortably process them. The prefrontal cortex, the sophisticated neurological center of logic, planning, and doing, essentially overrides the limbic system, which serves as the feeling center of the brain. It is an extraordinary act of functional compartmentalization. I find it deeply intriguing that we possess this built-in ability to cleanly sever the connection between action and sensation. In this state, we do not necessarily feel profound sadness or overwhelming stress. Rather, we experience a profound, sweeping absence. The system deliberately shuts down access to complex emotions to ensure we survive the immediate cascade of tasks. We slip into a highly efficient, automated existence, where flawless execution completely eclipses the messy reality of human experience. We see this functional compartmentalization playing out seamlessly in our everyday corporate and social environments. I think of the moments where we step into a crucial strategy meeting or navigate a complex family dynamic completely devoid of the internal turbulence we carried just moments before. We are simply executing the mission of the day. The modern landscape demands exactly this kind of rapid context switching. We become entirely absent from our own emotional reality, yet brilliantly present for the logistical requirements of our specific roles. We speak clearly, make highly calculated decisions, and manage sudden crises with a remarkably steady hand. Observers might commend our stoicism, our unbothered nature, and our unwavering professionalism. Yet, behind the eyes, the central command is operating in total isolation. We navigate the day as highly sophisticated, objective observers of our own lives, entirely detached from the visceral texture and emotional weight of the experiences we are physically moving through. The shadow of this emotional decoupling is subtle, but it is deeply pervasive. When we habitually suppress the feeling brain to prioritize the doing brain, we enter into a complex psychological bargain. This mechanism effectively prioritizes immediate functional survival and social stability, but the cost is often a profound sense of absolute alienation from ourselves. When the tasks are finally completed and the external demands fade into the evening, the silence that follows can feel incredibly vast and unsettling. I often contemplate the stark reality of realizing you have not felt a genuine emotion, neither profound joy nor true sorrow, in weeks or even months. The emotional absence we initially cultivated for efficiency becomes a void we cannot easily escape. We become strangers to our own internal landscape, safely insulated from external distress, but equally insulated from the depth of genuine human connection and meaning. Integrating this decoupled self requires immense patience and gentleness. We cannot simply force the limbic system back online without overwhelming our delicate neurological circuitry. Instead, we must explore a gradual re-invitation of feeling. What if we started by simply noticing physical sensations without attaching any narrative or judgment to them? The warmth of a ceramic cup of coffee, the specific woven texture of a fabric, the exact temperature of the evening air. This process is not about diving immediately into the depths of unexamined sorrow or expansive joy. It is about proving to the nervous system that sensation itself is safe. We can appreciate the incredible protective capacity of our prefrontal cortex while gently reminding it that it no longer needs to stand guard alone. Slowly, we allow micro moments of sensation to bridge the wide gap between our mechanical actions and our authentic internal experience, welcoming the feeling brain back home. This brings us to a fascinating visual and psychological paradox. I have often wondered, what if extreme, flawless competence is not always an indicator of thriving, but occasionally a highly sophisticated distress signal? There is a widespread phenomenon where individuals appear perfectly successful to everyone around them, while internally experiencing a total, quiet lack of purpose. It is a hollow competence. We construct an outward facade that radiates capability, optimism, and unyielding control. Yet, behind this impeccable presentation, the internal operating system is running entirely on fumes. We are functioning beautifully, but the deeper meaning has quietly evaporated. It is a striking juxtaposition between the external evidence of a life well lived and the internal experience of silently walking through an empty room. We become the brilliant architects of an illusion, one that ultimately isolates us from the very people we seek to impress with our flawless execution. In our modern visual culture, this hollow competence often manifests as an immaculate, highly curated aesthetic. We cultivate the perfect, optimized morning routine, the pristine living space bathed in natural light, the seamless integration of demanding work and stylized wellness. Every curated image and well-rehearsed social interaction reinforces the mask. We project a modern, clear aesthetic that suggests we have utterly mastered the art of living. The people around us look at this careful curation and offer continuous, genuine admiration. But this admiration slowly transforms the aesthetic into a quiet, velvet prison. The more deeply others believe in our flawless presentation, the heavier the mask becomes to wear each day. We find ourselves trapped by the very image we worked so relentlessly to build, unable to express vulnerability because it would betray the character we have silently agreed to play. We are adored for the glossy surface, while the depths remain entirely unseen. The inherent shadow of this extreme aesthetic control is profoundly isolating. We engage in a continuous, exhausting performance that heavily prioritizes external social safety, but the true cost is absolute internal suffocation. We maintain the illusion because it protects us from scrutiny and judgment, yet it simultaneously prevents anyone from offering genuine, messy support. The admiration of others becomes a thick barrier to true intimacy. We begin to harbor a quiet fear that if people saw the exhaustion behind the pristine routines, their respect would instantly vanish. This creates a profound loneliness, experienced most acutely in the center of a crowded room. We are surrounded by people who love a projection, an avatar of our own making. We sacrifice our authentic, complex human reality for the cold comfort of being perceived as indestructible, leaving our true selves to navigate the quiet emptiness entirely alone. How do we begin to dismantle an aesthetic that has protected us so well and for so long? The integration here involves intentionally allowing the messiness of actual human existence to gently peek through the curated facade. What if we experimented with letting a small, harmless imperfection remain visible? We might admit to a respected colleague that we simply do not have the answer today, or confess to a friend that our pristine wellness routine has collapsed under the weight of sheer exhaustion. This is not about tearing down the entire structure all at once. It is about selectively lowering the drawbridge. We can recognize that true admiration and deep connection are fundamentally different things. By incrementally dropping the performance, we invite others to connect with our reality, rather than our projection, trading the heavy illusion of perfection for the grounded warmth of shared human vulnerability. As we continue this exploration, we must carefully examine the biological consequence of operating at such relentless speeds. When a life is consistently lived at a level 10 intensity, constantly managing high stakes, chronic demands, and continuous input, the brain undergoes a subtle but profound adaptation. We experience a stark reduction in reward sensitivity. The baseline for what registers as stimulating or joyful shifts dramatically upward. It is a fascinating, yet deeply concerning, biological defense mechanism. Because the nervous system is flooded with high-intensity demands all day, the quiet, level 3 joys, the gentle colors of a fading sunset, the slow cadence of a quiet conversation, the simple taste of a quiet meal, fail to register on the internal radar. We lose our access to subtle beauty. The mind becomes so accustomed to the roar of the hurricane that the sound of a gentle breeze feels entirely indistinguishable from absolute silence. We witness this reduced sensitivity most clearly in the quiet hours after the workday ends. I observe a fascinating pattern where highly functional individuals do not seek profound rest after extreme exertion. Instead, they instinctively seek a dopamine buffet of high-intensity distraction. We turn to rapid-fire social media feeds, fast-paced television editing, and simultaneous streams of digital input. We are physically exhausted, yet we deliberately consume cheap, rapid stimulation to drown out the silence of the room. The quiet is not experienced as a relief. It is experienced as a void that must be urgently filled. We transition from the intense demands of our external responsibilities directly into the intense stimulation of our glowing screens, ensuring that the biological engine never actually powers down, and the nervous system remains suspended in a perpetual state of rapid consumption, unable to find the off switch. The shadow side of this continuous sensory input reveals a profound discomfort with our own internal landscape. This evening dopamine buffet prioritizes immediate emotional avoidance and distraction from the void, but the immense cost is the complete atrophy of our capacity for presence. Silence, rather than being a space for restoration and rest, begins to feel like a direct threat to our habitual state of readiness. In the absence of extreme stimulation, the suppressed exhaustion and unexamined emotions we carry threaten to surface. So we keep the volume turned up, effectively drowning out our own internal physiological signals. We trade the rich, nuanced texture of a quiet life for the flat, glaring light of continuous digital distraction, forever chasing a peak of stimulation that leaves us feeling increasingly depleted, restless, and paradoxically empty once the screen finally goes dark for the night. Restoring our sensitivity to subtle joy requires a deliberate and courageous lowering of our internal intensity threshold. We must consciously uncouple from the roar of constant input. What if we approach this not as a form of deprivation, but as an essential recalibration of our internal hardware? We can start by intentionally creating very small pockets of low stimulation time. It is about allowing the mind to rest, without an immediate digital substitute. We might sit by a window with a cup of tea, deliberately resisting the powerful urge to document the moment or consume external information. Initially, the contrast will feel stark, uncomfortable, and even deeply boring. But over time, as the nervous system realizes it is no longer under constant bombardment, the capacity to perceive subtle beauty naturally returns. We slowly reclaim our ability to be nourished by the simple, quiet rhythms of ordinary, analog existence. This brings me to a fascinating internal experiment, a shift in lens that challenges our default programming. What if the most biologically demanding task we can undertake in the modern world is not working harder, but deliberately doing nothing? We need to initiate an internal inventory, functioning much like a quiet check engine light on a dashboard. We must learn to distinguish between mere accomplishment, the physical crossing off of tasks on a list, and true engagement, the act of actually being present and alive in our own lives. I often invite people to conduct a quiet, honest audit of their day. We spend so much energy asking, "What did I accomplish today?" But a far more revealing question is, how much of my life today did I actually feel? If the answer hovers near 0%, despite a mountain of completed tasks and optimized routines, we are effectively operating in a state of quiet, biological emergency. Translating this internal inventory into our modern reality requires a practice that many find excruciatingly difficult: strategic boredom. It involves a deliberate daily fast, carving out just 10 minutes of purely non-goal-directed activity each day. There is no phone within reach, no podcast playing in the background, no book to read, and absolutely no problem to solve. It is a complete cessation of external input. In our hyper-connected, hyper-optimized environment, this 10-minute window can feel vastly longer than an hour of intense labor. We sit with ourselves, observing the frantic machinery of the mind as it desperately searches for a task to execute or a screen to scroll. This is the raw, unfiltered experience of the hardware attempting to recalibrate itself. It is the necessary, intentional pause required to disrupt the relentless momentum we have normalized as our baseline state of being. The shadow aspect of this stillness practice is the immense physical and psychological discomfort it initially generates. Sitting in deliberate silence prioritizes long-term nervous system regulation, but the immediate cost is facing the accumulated stress we have been successfully outrunning for years. Without the protective, heavy shield of busyness or digital distraction, the suppressed exhaustion, the lingering background anxieties, and the sheer physical tension held in our muscles suddenly become glaringly apparent. The urge to flee this stillness, to rapidly reach for a device or suddenly remember an urgent chore, is incredibly overpowering. We realize, often with a sense of profound shock, just how thoroughly we have constructed our entire lives to avoid spending 10 uninterrupted minutes in our own company. The stillness highlights the profound estrangement that has developed between our highly active minds and our deeply fatigued physical bodies. The process of integration here relies entirely on courageously riding out that initial intense wave of discomfort. We must sit through the agitation until the biological tide begins to turn. By refusing to feed the system with new inputs or distractions, we allow the circulating adrenaline to slowly drop back to a baseline level. It is precisely in this quiet space, after the urge to flee has finally subsided, that the feeling brain begins to softly come back online. We might simply notice the gentle rhythm of our breath, the subtle tension releasing in our shoulders, or an emotion we had previously ignored. This practice of strategic stillness is not an escape from reality. It is a profound return to it. We quietly teach the body that it is safe to stop producing, safe to stop consuming, and perfectly safe to simply exist in the quiet present. As the feeling brain reawakens and the stillness settles, we encounter a fundamental shift in our psychological framework, the transition from functional to vulnerable. Highly capable individuals often fall into a hidden psychological snare, which we might observe as the utility trap. Deep down, we begin to subconsciously believe that our inherent worth is entirely dependent on what we can produce, solve, manage, or carry for others. We view ourselves primarily as highly effective instruments of utility. The mere thought of being unproductive feels completely synonymous with being unlovable or socially irrelevant. I find it deeply poignant how tightly we cling to our competence, wielding it as a heavy shield against the fear of inadequacy. We mistake usefulness for genuine connection, assuming that if we are indispensable to the functioning of our environment, we are somehow safe and secure in our place within it. To break free from this relentless utility trap, we must experiment with a radical behavior in our output-driven modern context, the act of being utterly useless. This means intentionally pausing the machinery of helpfulness. It involves the terrifying practice of admitting profound exhaustion to a partner, friend, or colleague without immediately offering a productive reason or a 5-step plan to resolve it. We stop organizing the weekend events. We leave the logistical problem unsolved for a day, and we quietly observe what happens. In a society that aggressively equates human value with tangible output, choosing to be unhelpful feels intensely countercultural and dangerous. We step back from the exhausting role of the perpetual problem solver and allow ourselves to simply inhabit our fatigue. We bravely strip away the familiar armor of competence to see if the people around us will stay when we have nothing tangible to offer them. The shadow of stepping into this new vulnerability is the acute, visceral fear of losing our identity. The utility trap prioritizes ego stability and the comforting illusion of control, but the profound cost is the loss of authentic, unconditional connection. When we finally stop producing, we are suddenly faced with the terrifying possibility that our utility was the only reason we were valued in the first place. It is a profound existential risk. We fear that setting boundaries or revealing our absolute depletion will result in immediate abandonment. The compulsion to remain high-functioning is ultimately a defense mechanism against this deep-seated fear of rejection. We keep serving, organizing, and flawlessly executing because the uncertainty of standing empty-handed before another person feels far more dangerous than the familiar, crushing weight of our own chronic daily exhaustion. True integration requires us to fundamentally redefine the architecture of our relationships and our internal metrics. We must learn through experience that genuine connection is built on shared needs and mutual support, not just flawless results. What if we began to view our vulnerabilities not as liabilities to hide, but as the very bridges that allow others to truly reach us? We slowly shift the overarching goal of our daily lives from pure optimization to deep integration. This means choosing certain activities or relationships not because they make us better, more efficient, or more impressive, but simply because they make us feel deeply human. We allow ourselves to be witnessed in our states of rest, confusion, and depletion. By relinquishing the exhausting need to be endlessly useful, we create the space to be genuinely known, discovering a profound worth that exists entirely independent of our output. As we draw these complex threads together, we must confront a stark, unapologetic reality about the world we inhabit. Society will never tap you on the shoulder and politely tell you to stop. The external world deeply loves your high-functioning self because your relentless output is highly convenient and immensely productive for the collective. The systems we operate within are deliberately designed to extract maximum utility, continually rewarding your capacity to endure immense pressure without complaint. There will be no external permission slip granted for your rest. But beneath the accolades, the perfectly managed schedules, and the flawless aesthetic, Your body and your deeper emotional architecture are meticulously keeping the score. The invisible ledger of borrowed energy and suppressed emotion is continuously, quietly tallied. Recognizing this dynamic without judgment is the first, crucial step toward reclaiming agency over your own biological and psychological reserves. There comes a quiet threshold in everyone's life, where we must honestly evaluate the sustainability of our momentum. I often wonder how we can better recognize the subtle moments when our drive shifts from a tool of creation to an instrument of self-erasure. If you find yourself entirely unable to stop, even when facing physical illness or profound physiological depletion, the state of readiness has transitioned into a rigid compulsion. When extreme competence functions primarily as a heavy shield against unexamined emotional pain, it is a clear signal that the internal architecture requires careful, supportive attention. Acknowledging this boundary is not a failure of endurance or a sign of weakness. It is a profound act of self-awareness. It is recognizing that our vast capacity to function must be balanced by an equal capacity to receive support, stepping away from the heavy belief that we must carry the world alone. Reaching out for this support involves facing one final shadow: the realization that the mechanisms that helped us survive are now the very things holding us back. It requires immense bravery to step into a professional setting, a counseling space, or a quiet conversation with a loved one, and admit that the engine is finally running dry. We must grieve the illusion of our own invincibility. It is completely normal to feel a sense of loss as we dismantle the high-functioning armor we wore for so long. The transition feels destabilizing because we are learning to navigate the world without our primary defense mechanism. But on the other side of this dismantling is a life not governed by adrenaline and avoidance, but by deliberate choice and genuine presence. We trade the exhausting safety of perpetual motion for the terrifying, beautiful freedom of actually standing still. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, I want to leave you with a moment of quiet reflection. We have navigated the adrenaline engines, the emotional decoupling, the intense dopamine loops, and the terrifying beauty of vulnerability. I invite you to pause right now and ask yourself, which of these trade-offs resonated most deeply with your current stage of life? Are you trading long-term clarity for situational safety? Are you sacrificing subtle joy for immediate distraction? The journey away from a purely mechanical existence is not about discarding our ambitions. It is about remembering that our value is not inextricably tied to our endurance. We can be brilliant and profoundly effective while still allowing ourselves the grace of fatigue, the beauty of silence, and the rich texture of genuine connection. We are allowed to pause the engine. As you step back into the rhythm of your day, I hope you carry a softer awareness of your own immense, imperfect humanity. Stay simply human.